Okay, so now we're going to transition to our panel, our second panel discussion of the workshop. I'd like all the panelists to please turn on your video if you can. If you're, hopefully everyone's on. We have a couple folks, yep. Martin and Kelly and Stephen. And we also, great, we have Lia as well. Excellent. So also, if anyone has not done this already, you can go up to the layout button on the top right and click hide participants without video, and then you'll get a somewhat larger view of our panelists. So I think we'll start out with a few short introductions from each of you, just because we might not have heard from you over the conference, and you guys have interesting backgrounds and roles within the community here. So maybe we'll start with Stephen, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and I guess you can just go around each person and just something short about your focus in science, and of course also in this question of funding and community support for open source and open science resources.
Hi, everyone. And yeah, thank you for having me. And it's great to be on the panel. I'm Steve Crawford. I'm the Science Data Officer and lead for the Open Source Science Initiative at the Science Mission Directorate. And so my position is in funding open source software and also enabling open science across NASA. I'd actually, my background is as an astronomer. I was going to say, I have developed open source software for detecting exoplanets, but that was about 10 years ago. And definitely not up to date with the amazing packages being presented here. So.
Thanks, Steve. Someone want to go next? Maybe Kelly?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelle Cruz. I'm a professor at CUNY Hunter College based in New York City. I also spend a lot of time at the Flatiron Institute and also the Museum of Natural History. Most of my experience with open source software comes from being on the coordinating committee of the AstroPi project.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Martin, why don't you go next?
Hi, Abby. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invite. I haven't managed to listen to the whole meeting, but I have listened to the last couple of hours. Really interesting. I'm a big fan of anything software. I am a program director at the National Science Foundation. And so when you write proposals to the NSF, they come to a team of which I am one. But I have a specific focus in ground-based optical and infrared facilities, NOAA Lab. And also I have right now a big hand in NSF's Exoplanet awards program, not because it's my main gig, it's just that currently we're missing an individual, and that individual is going to be coming on board in a couple of months. But until then, I've got to hold up the fort for everybody, which is, also one of my backgrounds. So, many of you remember me from my NASA days, and specifically for the Kepler mission. So if you've ever used any of those horrifically clunky now Kepler tools, which are in the public domain, those all originated with me and the guest observer office there for the Kepler mission.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Yes, we certainly remember you. Great to have you back. Lia, you want to introduce yourself again?
All right, hi. Hope you can hear me okay. My name is Lia Corrales. I'm an assistant professor at University of Michigan. I kind of come from all sorts of wacky areas. I'm mostly known for my high energy astrophysics work in astromineralogy of interstellar dust. But I'm also starting to get interested in planets and characterizing aerosols and exoplanet atmospheres. I have a lot of experience with open source, being on the Learn AstroPi team as part of the AstroPi project. And I also chair a working group in high energy astrophysics codes, interfaces, and tools, where we're interested in engaging in some more open source practices and encouraging the next generation of high energy astro software developers as well.
Sounds great. Thank you. And thanks to all of you again for being agreeing to be on the panel here, participate. So reminder to everyone, please post questions, concerns, topics, anything that you have a burning desire to hear from our panelists on. I'm going to start with maybe sort of a big sort of open-ended point or question that came up in several different discussions, which is essentially solicitations or opportunities within NASA and NSF that everyone wants to highlight or is aware of, that our broader faculty, grad student, postdoc community can think about when looking for specifically for support for open science, open source initiatives that you guys are excited about or have been successful in a sense. So I'll open it up.
Are you asking the panel, or are you
Yes.
asking?
Yes. No, this is for you guys.
I
This is
see.
for the panel. If you have suggestions, obviously, Martin and Stephen are actual administrators here, but on some of these things. But if you have suggestions for all of our folks online.
So maybe I'll start then, if that's okay with the other committee members. Thank you, because maybe NSF is less familiar to many of you. I think many of you think NASA is a more natural place and any more lucrative place to go with proposals. To be quite honest with you, there's just a larger awards budget within NASA Astrophysics and NASA Planetary Science. Compared to NSF astronomy, and that's just the budget coming in, not anything else. But there are a series of annual solicitations, which I think software-oriented scientists would be interested in checking out, looking at the scope of those solicitations and seeing if they've got work which is a good fit. I've got the list in front of me. You can find it really easily if you just do a browser search for NSF astronomy. It'll bring you to the front page of the astronomy division at NSF, and one of the menu links on the left there just says programs. You click on that, and it will give you a very sort of a medium-sized list of those solicitations. So looking down that list right now in front of me, the big one, the main one that many people apply to year after year is the AAG. That's the Astronomy and Astrophysics Research Grants. So unlike NASA, which is far more strategic than NSF is, in the sense that they are building missions and they are supporting missions and they're supporting the users of those missions, NSF is much more blue sky. And it's more concerned than NASA's concern. Their main focus is those missions. NSF's main concern is societal impact and growing a STEM community. And so not only doing good science with these awards, but also making sure that these awardees, these PIs, are paying back into the community and paying back into education and building that next generation of scientists. And so that's almost as important as the main science focus of the proposal. And so we don't have solicitations which are sort of split by topic area. So we really have this one big main solicitation per year, and it's in November, so there's plenty of time to be thinking for the next one. But everything comes in through the AAG with some exceptions. And so if you're looking for a 2 or 3 or 4 year award with the kind of scope to sort of maintain or build a new research group, postdocs, students, the AAG is your main window into NSF funding. But there are other things in here that I think you can leap on as well. There are much more NSF-wide solicitations for cyber infrastructure. Yeah, go ahead.
we don't have that much time, and this is a lot about funding, and I'm not, and I maybe want to see if anybody in the audience wants to dig deep into funding. My sense of this audience, having looked around the Slack, is that a lot of people might be in stages where funding isn't their primary concern. It might be more about, how do I support users? How do I get more developers? Should I make it open at all? Um, Funding is of interest, Sukrit says. I guess my question is, please be more efficient.
I guess, Kelly, then the answer is just look at the website. There are
Well, I
multiple.
mean, that's also, sorry, I apologize. That's also too flippant because, so I guess I would paraphrase it this way, which is that if you're proposing new science and you want to include cost for supporting open source software in there, do that. There are new proposal mechanisms at the NSF and the cyber infrastructure, which are more focused on software. Um, and I think if you're interested in proposing to one of those, you're also competing against other subfields. And it's worth getting in touch with Martin directly, I think, to
So,
chat about, if you have a package which you want to make, a big deal and get
so
funding
Kelly,
directly for that package.
you're making exactly the point I was about to make.
Good.
So I don't know whether to start or stop, Kelly and Avi, but maybe I'll just pass it on to the next speaker and
No, I mean, you laid out a nice intro there, Martin. Like, for folks who have never even applied in this sense, and many of our grad students and postdocs may be in that position. I think Kelly makes a great point in that, and you did as well, Martin, in that often software is designed and built for obviously a science research problem. And we want to build it out, or we want to expand it, or we want to, in fact, find funds to maintain and make it a community resource. But it's often challenging to thread the needle on that, which I think Kelly's point to as well. I'd love to hear from Stephen and Leah in that question of how we're not software developers, we're not big data scientists coming up with commercial solutions. A lot of times we're trying to take research software and support it and make it more user friendly, these types of things.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and maybe give a quick NASA point of view. As kind of Martin said, there's a plethora of different options with NASA. And I unfortunately didn't get a chance to talk to Megan Ansdale or Hannah Young-Cadell before the panel, who are the two leads for the Exoplanet, and they're the two program officers for the Exoplanet call, which is a cross-divisional call. And that should be advertised hopefully again in the future. And if you have that kind of specific questions, they'd be the great ones to reach out to. And this is actually, especially for all the younger researchers, I would actually say a real hidden trick is to actually reach out to your program officers. They want to see you succeed in what you do, and they can actually answer a lot of your questions or directly to the right people. So reach out to me, reach out to Megan, reach out to Hannah. We'd all love to help you out. My work is actually in enabling open science across NASA. And so we have a lot of cross-divisional type of calls, especially for supporting open source software. We have one very, very large call, which is focused on sustainability that was released in ROSES 20, and then will be released again in ROSES 23. It is supporting packages like AstroPy, SunPy, NumPy, and other types of projects. We also have just released in ROSES 22 a rolling call. So this is always open for high priority open science. And this is focused on innovative projects, especially ones which are cross-divisional, and exoplanets are always cross-divisional. These are all advertised in NSpires. In addition, there's also calls under the astrophysics and planetary programs, ADAP and PDART, which also both call out software and looking for it. And then the one other place for people to look is also in the archive proposals for our different telescopes. They often accept calls and support projects which are supporting software. And so that's a very wide range of different opportunities for funding. And so I'll give that quick overview, and I'll hand it off to Lia to see if she has particular thoughts to share.
Yeah, I was gonna tack on to everything that was just said actually, and to give a little context for what Steve said too. Roses is the like annual list of open calls coming from NASA, and I learned recently that it's called Roses because it comes out on Valentine's Day. So you can look forward to that really soon. Yeah, I just learned. It's so amazing. So if you go to nspires, nspires.org or something, I can't remember, you'll be able to see that. And I think my one big piece of advice is to like look beyond like the calls that you always hear about, like AAG and ADAP and XRP and things like that, because even though those are definitely appropriate places for you to say, I want to do this amazing science project and it's going to support an open source software that everyone can use, that's definitely how you should propose those things. But you might be able to find other cross-divisional or like interdisciplinary programs that will enable you to do that science and to pay people to work on software that maybe some of your colleagues aren't realizing are there. So definitely look beyond like the traditional venues. I think something that has helped me a lot is for sure, right? It's like I'm proposing to work on this package to answer this specific science question. That is what's actually going to get you funded. Um, and then the other thing is that I'm finding that, it's really helpful to fold in sustainability by requesting money for hourly payment for like experienced people maybe who are CS majors, not necessarily in astronomy, but like bringing in some skills that is definitely needed in order to create like that open source environment that is going to really help the entire astrophysical community. That's my 2 cents on ways to gear your proposals.
Sounds great, Leah. I guess a similar sort of question also to Leah and to Kelly in particular, but more generally is, what about beyond NSF and NASA? Or what about some more sort of, less traditional pathways for this? We know there's lots of new citizen science programs, other types of avenues in off of big data, even, private companies. We just heard from Sarah Blunt about her work at Google and other places. So I don't know. Are you guys aware of other unorthodox avenues?
Well, so I want to add in one, which is, I guess, in between orthodox and unorthodox, which is the way the AstroPipe project now has funding from the Moore Foundation, so that's a private foundation, and NASA. And in order to keep our, open, community-driven approach, what we're doing is basically making like a sub call for proposals from people within the community that want to contribute to the AstroPipe project. So we also have an annual, semi-annual call for funding ideas. Basically, what does the community think we should spend our money on? And that could also be, I'm working on this one sub package, or I want to add exoplanet modeling as an affiliated package to AstroPi, but I need support to meet the software development standards of becoming an affiliated package. And AstroPi itself actually has funding which can help support that effort. And it's a very lightweight funding idea process, which is basically just making a markdown file. So that's one way that the AstroPi project is trying to innovate and to get more support and funding into the hands of smaller developers and smaller projects. So there's one. The private foundations are also very interested in supporting this work at multiple levels. I don't know off the top of my head, like all the different calls right now, and sometimes they're also not calls. Sometimes they're things which you just need to know about and be in the loop on. I can tell you that, I think I can tell you, the Simons Foundation is going to be releasing a call for proposals very soon, which is actually focused more on support for individuals rather than like project based where, you propose a whole budget. This is more like I want to support myself like a fellowship for junior folks, either as postdocs or early career, who have more of a software focus.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kelly. Other
And
thoughts?
I will just jump in real quickly that at least for more junior researchers, the Finesse NASA call is currently open. And that is one that also, it's open till February 14th, and I posted that in the chat, but that also is a good opportunity, although very close by. But for those who are looking for other opportunities for funding.
I think one other thing I wanted to say with regards to like thinking about some like less traditional areas, there are some really amazing like educational grants from the NSF where, you know, again, if you're saying, okay, I have, let's say, started this package on open source, but I'm at the point now where we need to bring in more people. It needs a lot more work in order to make it even more awesome. That's really outside the scope of one individual person. Really just kind of looking at it as an educational opportunity and mentoring, let's say, undergraduates into a program where they're going to be able to thrive and also do like amazing research. It could be another opportunity to fund your particular open source software package.
Sounds good. Thank you, Leah. Sort of a similar question, I think, to this is, are there ways to essentially sort of get ongoing support somewhere for, you know, projects that are long-term? For example, I'm thinking of folks like the MESA project, which is absolutely foundational to so many areas of stellar astrophysics. Maybe one of the MESA folks is on the call. They can talk about it, but you know, this is a software project that has gone on for decades now, maybe. And you can imagine that maybe folks at NASA or NSF were less able to fund that in the long term. Maybe are, but maybe not. I don't know. What's the status? How does that work? Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So this is also a challenge for all of our scientific projects, right? You know, NSF grants and NASA grants are 3 years at most, like 5 years if you think about the no-cost extensions. And so for me, one of the pillars of long-term sustainability for interesting software projects is long-term stability for the key players within the project. And so, you know, getting folks in reliable positions where working on developing that product is actually one of the things that they were hired to do. And so it doesn't need to be the only thing they were hired to do, but that where it's recognized by that person's employer that this is like a really valuable thing which the person is working on to do. And so if you have folks that are in stable positions that then can work on, okay, now we're going to get a 3-year grant, or now we're going to apply to both NSF and NASA and more all at the same time, or be in a situation where it's like, actually, I know I have a big teaching load next semester and I have this postdoc who's going to work on it anyway. I don't need to submit any funding proposals right now because you have these other, you know, you have your other resources as part of a different employment position. So that's one aspect to take, but I think stability for the leaders in the project is a very important component.
Yeah, great point, Kelly. Steve, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll you know, just maybe add in an example. As mentioned, we've had we do have a call which is related to sustainability of software, which is our open source tools, frameworks, and libraries, which is particularly focused on sustainability. We are right now planning to release that as part of ROSES 23 later in this calendar year. Date is still to be determined. But you know, and that's one of the things that I think when looking at that, we've been able to support both some of the bigger projects and the really underlying projects, but we're also interested in supporting collaborations of projects. And so I think that's possibly maybe a conversation to have as part of this community of how to actually um, you know uh, collaborate to benefit, and what structures would be best to actually be able to also kind of cross support each other. There's a aspect of I don't want to say consolidation, but also there's a lot of things that redundancies that can be shared when actually working together.
Yeah, great points.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's got to be some realism here. There are very few long-term projects at the NSF, and that's that. I mean, even when you look at facilities and you look at how long large ground-based telescopes have been operating, they are evaluated annually on certain scales, and they are evaluated on a big scale every 5 years, and they are recompeted every 10 years. And in order to meet that level of federal oversight for long-term government spending, you need to have the ability to respond to those reviews and support those reviews. And only sort of big organizations like Aura or NRAO actually have the sort of manpower that, the staff sizes and the scope to be able to live in that kind of world. And so sort of, it's not possible or it's really difficult for small teams to be able to support that kind of federal oversight, because that's kind of what you get if you want that long-term, decade-long funding. And so there's kind of a reason the government hands out grants in 3-year blocks, because it just minimizes the overhead on you and maximizes the science. But then you're hit with this balance problem where you've got very specific scientific and infrastructure goals which require longevity. And so there's a real difficulty here. We've hit a boundary here that we need to look at and see if we can find unique and innovative ways to solve. But for right now, it's like, as Kelle said, you're just going to have to keep proposing every 3 years in order to maintain something.
I think the other thing I'd add there is things like EMAC and also NextSci, I think are great examples of things which are potentially are same thing. Our science centers like NextSci still have to also do the same thing of reproposing every 5 years. That's the same case for us as it is for the NSF. You do have to review these things, but it's also that feedback from the community. And it is, and I'll give Kelle a shout out here for serving on a National Academy study on Earth and space science, open source software options for Earth and space science, which have led to our current positions now. And that's the other thing is, like, we don't know what the best ways are right now to actually provide for these. And so we need the community to come back to us to actually say, like, this is what we want. And to propose these solutions that we can actually then see if we can implement.
Yeah, great point. I just want to, with that, highlight one of the comments, I think from Jason in the chat, which just said the community could benefit from more software-focused solicitations. Are there good ways to lobby for such a high-level change? And obviously, the National Academy studies are fantastic, great way. Thank you, Kelle, and everyone else who did that, because I'm sure it makes a big difference. Are there other ways that the more broader community could continue to influence how this goes? Question, frankly, to all of you who have participated in this sort of area.
I wonder if the data centers themselves can take a more active role here. Because they do have that ability to respond to those 5-year, 10-year reviews. And I wonder if they can be employed as a more permanent home for many of these things and provide much of the maintenance overhead required to keep and maintain software and support it for the users. So I mean that's the most instant thing that I can think of. And I mean, Kelly's involved in a workshop next week in New York, and this is an NSF driven idea, because it's absolutely clear, and this is a slightly different problem, but it's very related, is that the ground-based astronomical community is playing catch up with NASA in terms of supporting data coming from its facilities. You know, our archives are not as mature, our supporting tools are not as mature, and we need to find a way to catch up, especially with potentially, hopefully, knock on wood, possibly big investments coming up in the future with ELTs. Not that there's any news there. I'm not announcing anything. We don't know. We're working on that. But there is an opportunity there to use you know, future development money to build current or new data centers to support these things, and include, you know, what I would call these tertiary sort of software tools, you know, to do the deep data analysis, to include that in these systems.
Yeah, that's a good word, tertiary. I think it's a really good question, and I think I'm gonna expand the scope a little bit more, which is that so the question, at least as I heard it, was how do we get more calls? How do we get more, you know, funding opportunities for software? And I'm going to rephrase that a little bit, which is like, how do we change the culture to value software more? And I think that every individual has a role to play in culture change, and every individual can sort of uh, uh, implement culture change in their different ways. And so I want to encourage everyone at their own institutions, at their own seniority levels, to innovate and to push the boundaries a little bit about what is it that you need in order to I'll say, like, improve the quality of the software that you're producing, or to improve the quality of the software that you're using. Maybe you want to, you know, have a hack day where y'all work on improving the documentations for someone's software, or maybe you want to lobby that one of the colloquium speakers every semester be focused on software, or maybe you want to advocate for, you know, more educational opportunities, so that, you know, there's so many. So I think the answer to the question is that we don't know yet. Right? We are in the process of building new models for how to build software and how to support it. And so we basically need the community to help everyone figure it out. And so I think one of the things which really helped um, craft the funding opportunity, which Steve was able to lead, which is supporting maintenance of software, was the experience of so many people getting frustrated with NSF because NSF was like, we can't support maintenance. And so we had a very well articulated problem, which is like, this is what we need. And we could go to NASA and explain, like, this is what we need the call to say. And so I think however you can contribute along whichever axes, whether it's education, whether it's in publication and peer review, in colloquium speakers, in hiring, like whatever, that information and experience in those case studies can then trickle up, or maybe I would like a stronger word than trickle, can flow. How about can flow up into the power structure to result in changes.
So yeah, that's a good point, and maybe it's worth just sort of listing very quickly the ways that you can ooze information up. And so one is obviously Astro 2020. It's a community document. Another one is advisory committees. So both NASA and NSF have their own advisory committees, which are populated by community scientists. Those people are named. They're on websites. Look at those names and go and talk to those people. Tell them what you want, because that's a direct conversation into the heart of these two agencies. Another way is workshops, and you've got to convince the agencies that they're going to sponsor those workshops. The fourth way, though, and this is perhaps one that's not so obvious, is proposal pressure. It is the most easiest way, or not the easiest way, it is the most likely way for you to change hearts and minds at the agencies, because they can see what the community are proposing for and they change their priorities accordingly.
Right, and that's exactly what happened with the AstroPi project, is that we got proposals declined, which then we could take to NASA and say, here's our proposal, how does this fit in? And to more also.
And I think in terms of cultural change, you know, I have a sense that we have a lot of early career folks here, and you know, actually kind of myself included, like to a certain extent, of course, but you know, no matter whether you're a theorist or you're an observer, you are using computer software day to day, every single day. And no matter what, it's super essential to your ability to do your research and your ability to do it reliably and well and fast. And it's not something that's traditionally taught in our programs. And so I think like either encouraging your, you know, people above you, and if you're in the faculty position like me, encouraging people above you and around you that this is actually a really important part of the curriculum, and that learning how to document your code correctly and write efficient and you know, well working code and tested code. I really loved I think it was Sarah, sorry if I'm forgetting her name, but when she was talking about how testing was so essential for building up this like um, really reliable code, and it was amazing to like see her confidence and like how well she's doing with it. Like that is the kind of stuff we need to see for like every person in their educational experience, I would hope. Like if you're not really into coding, that's fine, you at least need to know enough to get by with it and do well for others as well, for in terms of that reliability, that reproducibility, and that fairness. So yes, please do press on your advisors and people around you to make that part of the standard curriculum these days for astronomy research.
I mean, and the other thing, you know, what we do in our group is we take, you know, we say like, oh, okay, you know, it makes sense you don't have that plot yet because you spent a whole bunch of time, you know, learning, getting it on GitHub, like you had GitHub problems. And it's like, that is just as valid of a research challenge as trying to figure out why there's an outlier on the figure. And so I think I'm going to say like 5 years ago, I feel like a lot of my colleagues were like, oh, Kelle, like she's making, you know, she forces all her students to put her stuff on GitHub and they're writing tests and like, oh, I feel so sorry for them. They're having to learn all these things. And now those professors are coming to me being like, oh, Kelle, could you teach us? Like, could you help us? How we really need to start doing this now. And so I to sort of echo what Lia was saying about doing it loudly and proudly, even if, and I think that's one of the big challenges for our community is that a lot of people don't know how to do this stuff. It's hard. It's hard to figure out, and it's a moving target. Have you tried to package a Python package lately? Like it's hard and scary. Um, and I think recognizing that, you know, we're scientists, we need to learn new things. Like we shouldn't be intimidated by learning new things and like trying to figure this stuff out. You know, we found planets around other stars, for goodness sake. Like we can figure out, you know, what is a way to package a Python package properly, you know, in 2023. It might be different in 2024. How we detect exoplanets is going to be different in 2024. And so treating these computational software development, software engineering challenges in the same way that we treat our scientific challenges in your group and with your people, I think is also a really great way to start for more junior folks.
Great. I thank you, everyone, on this topic. Really valuable. We have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to switch over to non-funding support and infrastructure that either, you know, folks want to highlight, as in, you know, what things do you find really valuable besides GitHub, which we've heard tons about and is essential. But what other things do you think folks should know about, or would you like to see? And I'd love to hear if people want to paste things into the chat, like what are you missing? Are you missing data storage? Are you missing,
Well,
I'm gonna jump in with two quick additional things to help out. One is NASA is kicking off a year of open science, along with the NSF and the rest of the federal government, as announced by the White House last June. Our big effort around this is Transform to Open Science. So if you talk about learning how to do the open science and the culture change, come check out Transform to Open Science, TOPS, and come and I'll post that in the chat. And then the other example is, yeah, we're trying to help people get their data, get their facilities online, and especially because Natasha couldn't join. I'm gonna highlight one of the things that we worked with Natasha with was the opacities database. And so we did actually help, we're providing some of the infrastructure, her team is providing the applications, and combined together, we can actually provide and host this to provide some actual further support to that. So especially if you have to support data or other aspects, come reach out either directly to the Chief Science Data Office and the Open Source Science Initiative, or reach out to your favorite data archive. They're also going to be there to help, either MAST or NextSci or IPAC or HereStack. Or if you have software, I hear there's this good EMAC site that you should also be sharing on there too. So that's just a few resources.
Great, thanks, Steve. Other thoughts, questions from panelists about what you think is really valuable for folks to know, or maybe under the radar?
Well, actually, I really have to go in 2 minutes, and so I was wondering if there was any reverse conversation here. Is there? I think there's worth in hearing what people need and want, and so I can go away with maybe some stuff to think about. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I'd love to. If folks want to raise their hands or jump in. Something we've found a little bit, Martin, is that there's a little reluctance. I think there's an impedance barrier for folks jumping in and actual comments, but.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just going to put my email in the chat. If anybody has thoughts that they want to share, I can fold into future strategic thinking. And there's a lot of it going on right now, in particular because it is just shortly. It still is shortly after the decadal, and we are trying to rejigger, fix many of the things to be more successful, more resourceful, more efficient in the coming decade, and this is all part of those conversations and those equations. So if you've got any thoughts, you want to send them to me, I'll happily receive them.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, Kelly.
Yeah, so I want to highlight a couple sort of hidden gems. One of them I just posted about in the Slack, which is the AstroPi Slack random channel. There's lots of great software development, like workshop opportunities, training opportunities, opportunities to be on panels and like review things that happen in that channel. So that's one thing. Another thing, and maybe Alice, maybe you could post about this in the Slack, is now there's a new bi-weekly Zoom about open source software, and it's a growing community where you can hear from other developers about what they're doing and what they're writing. And from my perspective, we're at a really at a formative place in building the AstroPi developer community. And I feel like I'm right on the verge of like making a dedicated Slack workspace just for software developers, people interested in software development in astronomy. And I think it's probably time for that. I think we have critical mass where we can collaborate more and share best practices more and support each other more. But AstroPi Random Slack is a really good place for that right now. And Alice, yeah, why don't you plug your thing, which I did not describe well.
Okay, so it's a once a month meeting called Virtual Astronomy Software Talks, and I'll post a link to it in the chat. I mean,
Vast.
in the vast, right?
Thanks. It looks like we have one hand up. Catriona, do you want to jump in, and you can even turn on your video if you'd like to join in the panel.
Hi, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was meant to type a question into the chat or whether asking out loud was better.
You can ask it right now. That was great.
Great. I haven't checked my video works, so I can try and turn that on. Ooh. Thanks for the really interesting panel. I was just wondering, in terms of support for people developing open source software, I know that there's now journals coming out like JOS, so you can get citations on your software, but I was wondering if there's, I don't know, ways you know of to make code citations, I guess, a little bit more equatable to paper citations, because I think that's something that holds me a little bit back with developing software, is that I feel like, oh, if I write a paper, I'm going to get a lot more citations, and that's going to be easier to demonstrate how useful what I'm doing is, versus I feel like it's still like metrics on GitHub are still maybe not super well understood.
Yeah, this is something we've talked about again and again in Python workshops since I could remember as a grad student. So I'm happy to give my perspective. So AAS Journals really worries about this kind of stuff, and there's like now a process for both citing your own software in your papers, or using your papers as a way to track your software, but also for creating like an actual ADS citation for your literal code. So I would recommend looking, I think the instructions might be in the AAS LaTeX template, but it's definitely there. Usually what you do is you create a release for your software on GitHub, and it's like connected to Zenodo. And so there's some instructions with that as well. But actually, if you just put my name into ADS, you'll see an example of that as first author. So the paper that I just released that I presented earlier this week, I also just re-released my dust scattering code because I had like put it onto a different GitHub repo. And so that's actually the top two things that pop up right now. So one is the paper and the other is the actual code. So that's just like an example. Can't say lots of people are citing it right now, but I'm just saying that it's definitely doable. You can create an ADS citation for your code.
Great, thanks. Let's have any last, thank you, Catriona, and thanks, Theo. Any last comment, Kelly or Leah, about any of the things we discussed?
I just want to say one thing, which especially for junior people, it can be really challenging to think about your future evaluators. And most of the people that are evaluating me at a professional level don't know the difference between JOS and AAS journals. And so we're kind of like hyper focused and thinking like, oh, like the AppJ letter is like the bee's knees. But once you get sort of past the postdoctoral level, you're in a pool of people that are not typically that are not just astronomers. And so JOS citations and first author papers in JOS, especially if you sell it, like why, especially if you're able to convince a dean or a different scientist, a chemist, like why this piece of software is so important, they will they're just looking for like those external cookies that they can count and don't care so much whether it's JOS or AAS journals. So if you have like lots of software, so my point is that it's better not to rely on things like GitHub stars, but rather take the time to make a JOS paper and recommend, and I think that Alice had raised her hand, right? Make sure that you make it really clear that you want people to cite this JOS paper. And then those citations will be worthwhile. Those are the most valuable types of citations and the lowest bar for getting good software into the recognized literature.
Sorry. So there are various groups working on elevating software citation and requesting citation specifically to software in addition to a paper, because the problem with the paper, citing a paper for software, is that it ambiguates what the citation is for, because the citations to a software paper can also be for the results in that paper, as I found
Yes.
when I was working on one of Daniel Foreman McKay's software. I went out and looked at who is citing his software paper and why, and a lot of the citations to one of his software papers is for the results in the paper, not for use of the software. So there are groups working on this, and if you're interested in joining one of them is the Software Citation Implementation Working Group, which is part of the Force 11 effort, and I'm happy to post links about that. So
Sounds good.
and will in
Yes.
Slack.
Please post everything in Slack. As someone said, all these resources are very valuable for folks to keep track of. So that's it. Panel, we went a little over time. Sorry for folks, but great discussion. I think really exciting overall. Great to have such a mix, and thank you, panelists, for participating again.
Yep, thanks for inviting us.
Thank
Sure.
you so much. This was fun.
Nice to see you, Leah.